This is the Real Estate Investing Abundance Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Allen. I know you're excited to get into today's show, but I have a very exciting announcement to share with you before moving to the show. We've just launched a complimentary and comprehensive webinar that, among other things, shows you how to legally use passive real estate investing to reduce your taxes, recession-proof your nest egg, and take the sting out of inflation. If you are curious to learn more, go to stevetucker.com/webinar. It is complimentary and only takes a couple of minutes of your time. Once again, that is stevetucker.com/webinar. I'll see you in the webinar. Enjoy today's show. Hello, enlightened investors, and welcome back to Real Estate Investing Abundance. I'm your host, Dr. Allen Lomax, and as always, I am delighted to have you back with us today. And we're going to be taking a look at using the debts and expenses that we already have to grow our wealth and expand our real estate portfolios. And with us today is Dr. Rob Scranton, who teaches people how to use their current debts and expenses to grow their wealth outside of the traditional approaches like scrimping, saving, and denying themselves the lifestyle that they want and desire. So welcome, Rob, and take us into the show and share a memorable experience that helped you to be who you are today.
Oh, thanks, Alan. Yeah, I would say one of those. I'm a huge basketball fan. Always loved basketball since I was a little kid, and I was at as you grow and mature in your basketball career, there's fewer and fewer people do it. If you make your high school team, you think all the kids you played with in grade school, and not very many of them are still playing in high school. And I was always the shortest, skinniest kid, but I was always the scrappiest, hardest worker as well. And so thankfully, I managed to stay on those teams by being the example the coach could point to of how hard everybody should work. And then one day, this magical thing happened where I grew a whole bunch between my between my junior and senior years, and I was playing with the starting five and the varsity when I'd always kind of rode the bench forever because I was just too short and skinny. You could blow on me and knock me off the court, pretty much, and take the ball away from me. And I think that's taught me that level of perseverance. That anything that I really want, that if you keep at it and you stay with it, that good things happen and come your way rather than giving up so easily and so quickly on things, which I see and observe so many people do. And so I think that was a cathartic experience for me that served me my whole life.
Yeah. Well, interesting. Well, tell us a little bit here about why it is that we can use our current debt and expenses to grow our wealth, and why the traditional approaches just don't work to do that.
Well, if we just look at some raw figures and statistics, most people in this country are following kind of the different, traditional approaches. You'll hear people say on radio broadcasts and stuff to buy term and invest the difference, and you should max out your 401ks and your IRAs. And for the most part, most people to some degree or another are trying to follow that and doing some degree of those things in their life. But why is it that 95% of the people in this country, it's estimated, will never retire with enough money to even maintain the current lifestyle that they enjoy now? If that works so well, wouldn't it be like 95% of the people are able to retire with those parameters rather than 95% of the people not being able to do it? And so, we talk to people about creating their own banking system to put themselves more in control of their own money so they can learn how to recycle, reuse, and recapture the same dollar over and over and over and over again, instead of those dollars leaving their family forever and funding somebody else's family's dreams and lifestyles by keeping that inside their family now and keep those dollars inside their family multi-generationally at the same time by just using a different type of bank than the traditional bank that they use, at the moment. You always hear people say that, oh, you should pay yourself first, but I don't know a single person in the United States that does that. When you get a check, or when you were working a W-2 job, Alan, where was the first place that check went to?
Well, to rent and to bills and to transportation. And
In a roundabout way, but didn't it first go to Wells Fargo or Bank of America or whatever a place was that
oh,
you banked with, so that you then could pay those bills, right?
oh yeah. And these days it goes directly there. It doesn't even pass through my hands.
That's
So
right, with the direct deposit and those kind of
yeah.
things, for sure. Well, if we just change that and instead, had all those types of checks go to our bank instead of the bank, that's one way we could truly start participating in that multiple day, interest rate that the banks are now making off of us before we send it out to other places and other peoples, and truly pay, ourselves first. Like changing one thing in our life, I kind of equate it similar to, I don't know, do you have any credit cards you use to gather airline miles or do that sort of thing that it's popular with a lot of people,
Um,
or get points or
well, yes, yeah, I do. I mean, I never carry any balances, but yes, I do
yeah,
have credit
me
cards.
neither. And I completely avoid that. And I do not recommend people carry balances. But if you're wise and prudent with using a credit card, it's just a tool, it's just an instrument. Some people will say that, oh, those are bad, you should cut them up. And you hear this on TV and in radio broadcasts. And I don't know that it's inherently good or evil either way. It's just a tool, it's just an instrument that we can use. But there is a way that you can gain a lot of benefits by using those type of point collecting or air mile collecting cards, rather than taking your income and paying all those bills you just talked about. If you just added one more step and you paid all those bills with your credit card, and at the end of the month you completely paid off your credit card, so you carried no balance, like you mentioned that you don't, which is wise and prudent. But now all of a sudden you've gained this thing, all these airline miles or points that you could use to take your family on a trip, just by adding one step in there. And that's what we're talking about, by adding this one step into your financial life, of how you can actually use your current debts and expenses you already have, to grow your wealth.
Well, tell us just a little bit about how the conventional banking system actually works and what is the problem with that.
Yeah, the problem is that they're so highly leveraged. My great grandparents lived through the Depression, and they almost lost their family farm and their farmhouse, not because they weren't good farmers, but because the bank in their local town that had always given them credit to buy the seed corn to plant in the spring went completely out of business. And this hasn't really stopped even in today's world. In 2023, in the first quarter of this year, four of the largest 10 banks in the United States completely went out of business, went broke, went bust. And the reason is because they're so highly leveraged. And a lot of people don't even realize that. The federal government allows this to happen. It allowed it to happen back then, and it still continues today. Where, if you, Alan, went and put $10,000 on deposit at your local bank, the federal government allows them to then make 9 separate loans to other people, $10,000 each, 9 separate loans with only that $10,000 there on deposit. So that means that if there ever was a run on the banks, the FDIC, the federal government doesn't have enough money in the entire federal government, let alone the FDIC insurance, to make all those people whole. So basically, the first guy in line would get all his money, and the next 8 people in line would be completely out of luck because the money is just literally not there. It's just all based on a trust system. That was what was occurring in that movie. I was like Jimmy Stewart, It's a Wonderful Life. Do you remember all the people coming there? And Jimmy Stewart was saying, "Well, the money's not here, Mrs. Jones. Your money's in the Santorini's house, and Mr. Santorini, your money's in the Smith's house." And he was trying to explain all that, and that still goes on. It still happens today. So it's actually one of the more risky places that you can warehouse your money, if you think of that as just a stopping point or a place to storehouse or warehouse your money.
You do a very good imitation.
Thank you. My wife would say otherwise, I'm sure.
so how do we get out of this traditional banking system and into a
Well,
system that works for us?
yeah. So, we'll never be able to completely avoid it, but we can certainly avoid having the amount of risk, that we do, in those traditional banks. Just if you don't mind me giving one good tip I've been telling people because of what's going on at the beginning of this year, if you, have any lines of credit at any banks that are active and you have loans out with them, I would take whatever amounts, especially if they're large amounts that you're warehousing there or you're keeping in savings, and I would move that to another bank just to ensure, because I can certainly see a scenario where if those banks got in trouble, like those four large ones, and you had a line of credit, it would be very easy for them to say, you know what, we're having a little bit of a struggle. We need to move your money from your savings account to cover this loan that you had with us. And poof, it would disappear for your use. If it was at least located somewhere else in another bank, they wouldn't have the option or opportunity to do that. So that's one thing I recommend to people. I also recommend that they never have, if we believe the FDIC insurance really will come good on that, that they never have more than $250,000 in any one bank. If they do, they should spread it out and have it amongst multiple banks. The other thing they can do is start creating their own banking system. Now, we use a tool called a front loaded or cash heavy banking policy with a mutual company that pays dividends and creates cash value inside the policy in a whole life policy. Now, I know some of your listeners might have already got up and run out of the room as soon as I say, insurance, but we've got a whole class on teaching them why this is probably one of the most valuable financial tools and instruments that they'll ever have access to in their life, including for all their real estate deals.
Well, you mentioned that you have a class. Can you tell us how we can take advantage of that class?
Yeah, Alan, it's a free 1 hour masterclass on the every aspect of the infinite banking system, as we call it, or becoming your own banker concept. And you can any of your readers can go to it and sign up to watch that on yourfinancialiq.org. So it's yourfinancialiq.org, and they can sign up for that and watch that hour-long masterclass. And we just offer that to anybody for free that wants to get educated on this and how we do that, turn their own debts and expenses they already have and use that to create wealth without them having to save extra or deny themselves things or really change their current lifestyle and what they're doing in their life at the moment.
Well, how much does a person need to get started in infinite banking?
So there are some parameters that the insurance companies give us. So it's usually about if they're under the age of 40. So we want them, they really need to kind of count on kind of storing away in this bank, committing to around 10 times, their age on a monthly basis. If they're over 40, around 15 times, their age to really make them work and function and be effective. It's just the way it always is with insurance. The younger you start, the more efficient, more effective that they're going to be with those things. But those are some pretty good, parameters to keep in mind, when people are wanting to do that.
So, so run that by again. So if they're 40, it's what?
10 times their age, under the age of 40, on a monthly basis that they'll want to keep in mind that they'll want to start contributing to their own bank. And this is, money they'll have access to. It's not like their 401k or their IRA where it's going to be tied up for 30 years and they'll never be able to use it and never have access to it. They'll have access to a large percentage of it within the first 30 days after starting that, getting that in force. And so this is what we see a lot of real estate entrepreneurs use this as their funding source, whether they're doing bridge loans, making hard money loans, or making down payments so they can move fast and close on cash deals more easily than they could by going and begging for permission from traditional banks as well. It puts them more in control. And the really neat thing is that while they borrow that money out of this policy and earn an interest rate or earn a rate, on the real estate somewhere else, they still earn all the rate and the interest and the dividends inside the policy because it never leaves the policy. They're just taking a loan against the general fund of the insurance company with their life insurance policy as collateral. And as far as I'm aware, that's the only financial instrument I've ever heard of where you can do that, earn a rate in two different places at the same time, and it's actually true.
Okay. So you're talking about 10 times 40, so 400 a month is what you're saying there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what about how is this going to affect our credit score if we are borrowing from our policy?
It's going to have no impact on your credit score at all because it won't be reported to anybody. Nobody will know about it. You don't have to ask permission or let people know what purposes you're using any of the money for or what you're doing it for. You just have a conversation with you and the insurance company because it's your money and they have to do they're contractually obligated to let you have access to the cash value up to the full amount that's in there at any time that you request it. And in fact, if you set it up with direct deposit, that can be in any bank account that you request in 2 days. A little bit longer. We have some clients who are older and still like traditional checks issued to them. So 4 to 5 business days, in those cases. But it won't affect your credit score because it's not reported to any credit bureaus at all.
Enlightened investors, if you haven't done so already, be sure and click that like button and also click that share so others can take advantage of the content. And finally, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single one of our upcoming episodes. And what occurs if we die while the loan is out?
So that's a really good question. So say somebody has just decided to, wow, I have the opportunity to move fast and close on this real estate deal if I can get them the down payment, in the next week, where somebody else that they're competing against is going to banks, filling out applications, doing this long drawn out process. And you're right. So they say they had $1 million death benefit and they borrowed 200,000 from the cash value of that. And it's purchased or in the process of purchasing this piece of real estate, they die. The only thing that would happen would be instead of $1 million of death benefit going to their heirs or their children, they would just take $1 million, subtract the 200,000 that was out with that loan, and their heirs or children would get 800,000 instead.
Okay. Well, how did you first become familiar with infinite banking?
That's a great question. Very, very interesting question. So I was one of those people. I have before I became a doctor, an accounting and finance degree, and I was kind of following the traditional what everybody was doing at work and what all my friends were doing and what my parents' friends were doing, funding my 401k, my IRA, doing all those kind of things. And in 2008, 2009, I saw my account plummet by about 40%. And I thought, well, this really sucks. I really worked really hard for this. And I don't think I really had the concept that that could happen. And I looked around at, my parents were right at the age where they were just retiring. Their friends were just retiring from their life, long jobs. And the worst time ever to have that happen and also cut yourself off from an employment check at the same time. And all of a sudden I started seeing all my parents' friends when I went to Home Depot or Lowe's, and of course they would joke about it. Oh, Rob, you know me, I've just tried that retirement thing. I'm just not one that can just sit at home and do nothing, and I just want to get back out there and just give me something to do. And I was kind of like, I'm kind of skeptical of that. I'm pretty sure you need to work, and that's why you're here. I just didn't buy it, but I get it. They were probably embarrassed because that was their plan, and they were doing what they'd been told and what everybody was doing, and that's what we talked about. For 95% of Americans, it just doesn't end up working out. And I was young enough, I'm like, wow, well, this isn't working out for me so far, and it didn't work out for my parents or their friends. So I don't want to count on this system that we're all following. So it kind of started my journey of looking and checking things out. And that's I first heard about this infinite banking concept and like, wow, that sounds amazing. In fact, that sounds too good to be true. If we've all heard, that kind of stuff before. And so I took my accounting and finance, analytical mind and tried to tear it apart and, flip it inside out and poke holes in it. And ultimately, I couldn't. Everything they said was completely accurate, 100% true. I went to my financial advisor and said, "Hey, what do you think about this?" And man, his visceral reaction of negativity was something to behold. You'd think that I had just accused his grandfather of being a commander of a Nazi concentration camp, and he was trying to backpedal and defend himself. It was bizarre, but he was so negative on it. I'm like, hmm. So I went back to my mentor who had told me about this infinite banking concept, and he said, "You know what, Rob?" He says, "I know the company that your advisor works for, and they're owned by Citibank." He said, "I want you to go to a website called BOLI. It stands for Bank Owned Life Insurance. So just BOLI.com. And you can look up any insurance or any bank in the country, Wells Fargo, your local bank, anybody, and find out how much whole life insurance that bank owns." So I went and looked up Citibank, just like you told me, and I found out that 35% of Citibank entire holdings, their entire portfolio of all their assets, 35% was tied up in whole life insurance contracts. And that was more than their real estate, more than their stocks and bonds combined. And I just thought to myself, well, they're telling me that this is so bad, but this is exactly what they're doing to the tune of billions and billions and tens of billions of dollars. So it just made me look at it sideways like, well, are they that stupid? Or do they know something that I don't know? And that's when I just realized that, boy, with my education and background and work experience, anybody in America, I ought to have known about this stuff, and I didn't. So I'm pretty sure most Americans don't know about this stuff either. And kind of has been a crusade of mine ever since. I had cousins visiting this morning that stayed with us last night, and I was telling them about all this stuff. It's just my natural conversation because it's just mind blowing to people, and they can't believe that they don't know about it. And I just want to try to educate and tell as many people about it as I possibly can, because it's been the financial bedrock and foundation stone for our family and everything that we've done over the last 14 or 15 years since we started doing it ourselves.
Well, I suspect your financial advisor probably told you that you would be better off buying term life insurance rather than whole life insurance. Probably a lot of us don't even really know the difference between the two, and why would we not take your financial advisor's advice?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think, and a funny thing is that the name really kind of says or implies everything, but we've heard the term so many times, I don't think people really think about what they mean. Term, it's designed for a certain term. And the term it's designed for is the period of your life when you're very unlikely to die. So they're just collecting premiums all the way to the point when you are likely to die. And then they jack up the premiums 10 times, 15 times so high that nobody wants it anymore, at that point. Whereas whole life insurance or permanent life insurance, again, the name, what does it imply? It's designed to last your whole life. It's permanent, insurance. And so that's really the big difference between the two. The other big difference is if you have a short-term view of things and of life in general, or if you have a long-term view, because I can see their argument. They might try to tell you like, oh, whole life insurance is so expensive. Okay, well, what time frame are we looking at? Are we looking at over a term of time, or are we looking over your whole life? Because term insurance, most people will pay premiums for the length of the term, not die. And that's money that's just, we talked about earlier, about recycling, recapturing, reusing the same dollars over and over again in your life. And, those premiums will just be wasted and gone. With whole life insurance, by the way we design these policies, by about year 10, you've already gotten back every dollar that you've ever put into this personal banking system, into this whole life insurance policy. Plus, you've got this death benefit thing as a cherry on top of it. And so when you think about it that way, for the rest of your life, that's basically free death insurance that doesn't cost you anything because you've gotten all the money back you've ever put into it. So when you look at it that way, which one is actually, the more expensive insurance? A type of insurance that you'll never use and never get any benefit from, or one that is after you've done it for 10 years, you're going to have your whole life and is essentially free insurance and will be there for sure because it's permanent insurance for your children, then to pass that wealth on generationally as well.
So just give us some concrete information here in terms of how we can actually create certainty for our future while we're dealing with so many uncertainties.
Well, and this is another great example of that, Alan. Thank you for asking that question. The value of economic certainty, I think, and peace of mind is really hard to calculate, but it's so invaluable, because when my financial advisors sat down with me, they were making all these predictions and guesses about the future, and everything they were doing is almost like a Monte Carlo casino game or something like that on what was going to happen in the future. And I was like, boy, there's just so many unknowns. I don't know how you can even sit here and look at me and, with a straight face and tell me all this stuff. Whereas, with these banking policies, somebody can literally tell us, we know what age they are, and then we just let the actuaries take over and tell us what the person needs to do to create absolute certainty in what they're doing. Because they could tell us, okay, I'm 35, and when I turn 65, I want to have an income stream from age 65 to 85 when I'm, likely to die, and I want to be able to pull 100,000 cash out of this policy. By the way, when they do that, it's a loan, and so it's not considered income by the IRS. So they will never pay tax on it while it grows and accumulates, and they will never pay tax on it when they use it to fund their lifestyle in their retirement because they're taken out as loan and not as income. And so we can plug those parameters into the actuarial data and tell them exactly what they need to start contributing on a monthly basis to make sure for certain, guaranteed, that when they're 65, they will have that $100,000 to pull out in cash value loans from age 65 to 85. Now, it might be a higher number than they like or they expect, but most people, whatever they're contributing to, don't ever know the amount that they should be putting in there, and they're almost always underfunding it no matter what they're doing anyways. But even if you couldn't do that amount, you at least know what the target is because it's guaranteed in a contract with the insurance company. So that is actually, to me, true financial planning, where we can actually decide what's going to happen in the future with absolute certainty because it's not subject to the fluctuation up and down of some stock market or something that we don't control.
Well, it's been wonderful having you here today. Let's go into our last questions here and share with us one of your most difficult setbacks and how you came through that and what did you learn from that?
Most difficult setbacks. I think it was the lesson I learned early in my career when I hired a marketing company. And that's why I tell people to, hey, go watch our webinar, prove it to yourself. This is true. You shouldn't believe everything I tell you or anybody else tells you. I'm telling you the truth, but you still should research it yourself. I hired a marketing company that sounded very good and tickled my ears and told me all the things I wanted to hear. And it was a $50,000 3-year contract with them. And about 3 months into working with them, all of a sudden my coach stopped calling me, and I called and would leave messages for him and didn't hear back. And then a couple of weeks later, when I called the phone number, I just got a dial tone and said that number is no longer in service. And I kept digging and digging and digging and found that they had taken my contract and sold it to a third party, bank, probably took a little bit of a discount to sell the note and then moved their money offshore or whatever and shut down their entire operations. Meanwhile, I was still obligated because I had signed that note with this bankers healthcare group. Was I'll never forget the name of it. I just keep sending that check to them for 5 years. But my dad always told me, he says, well, that's a good lesson, son, to learn in vetting the people that you're working with and researching them, absolutely as thoroughly as possible. And hopefully you learn that lesson. And it could have been a lot more expensive lesson some point later on, down the road. So I guess that's a trust but verify story for me. Because if I would have looked online on the internet, the same company under the same name had done the exact same thing to the dental industry and just fleeced, thousands of people in the dental industry before they came and did it to us doctors of chiropractic as well. So they already had built a track record, but I hadn't bothered to go and look at the track record.
Well, it's probably not unusual. Most of us don't do that background check, even with the internet as accessible as it is.
Yep.
Well, how are you putting your success as an entrepreneur to work to create universal well-being for all beings?
Well, I love entrepreneurs. I've been one my whole life is myself, and I feel like I understand the challenges and the kind of feeling like on an island sometimes as entrepreneurs as we can, and a lot of business owners and certainly doctors that I've seen got in to what they're doing out of passion and didn't necessarily realize that I believe they should be in whatever business they're doing that puts food on their table, and they should also be in the banking business, the personal banking business. And that's my mission to affect and impact as many people as I can to help them understand this and how they can do that, and help them set up and then guide them and mentor them and in using this in their life, and in particular in their entrepreneurial and investing life as I possibly can with the time that I have here on earth, because it's just been unbelievably important in everything that my family and my children have done in our financial life. It's and I'd like to see other people learn about it and utilize it, because we're not obviously learning this stuff in our schools, in our universities, or even in our workplaces for the most part.
Yeah. Well, imagine you've come to the end of your life and you lay on your deathbed. What do you look back on with your greatest sense of joy and fulfillment?
I think that would be it, is how many lives I've impacted and touched, and how many generations of families that taught how to keep those dollars that they earn inside their family and passing down. And I've always said that of anything, I feel like I've been a good father and a good role model, a good example, and taught my children lots of lessons. But if I can teach them how to utilize and understand this banking system and utilize it in their life, I feel like that'll be the most successful thing that I've done as a father. I even they all have their own banking systems. I set up my youngest child when he was 3 weeks old. I started his first banking policy for him. And I look at that with jealousy, because boy, when he's 40 years old, he'll still be making those $1,200 a year deposits, but that cash value will be growing by over $24,000 a year. I hope he looks at that statement every year when it comes, and thinks his dad was a pretty good guy, and setting that up for him at such a young age.
Well, Rob, thank you so much for being with us. Enjoyed having you today.
I really enjoyed being on the show, Alan. Thanks for the invitation and the opportunity.
Enlightened investors, wait, don't go just yet. I just want to remind you about our recently launched webinar that you will not want to miss. If you're at all curious and would like to learn more about how real estate investing can diversify your investment portfolio, alleviate the anxiety associated with Wall Street swings, leverage your 401ks and IRAs to substantially increase the return on your investment, and do all of this with turnkey, hands-off, passive real estate investments, then you'll want to immediately go to stevetalker.com/webinar. In the webinar, we'll also address the common dubious investment schemes that you want to avoid. To access the webinar, go to stevetalker.com/webinar. I look forward to seeing you in the webinar.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Estate Investing Abundance, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, a company working for passionate professionals like you to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steve Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Steve Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures, great and small, flourish abundantly. For resources to develop your financial independence, connect with us at stevetalker.com.